So I sometimes get quite a bit of criticism on my videos, which is fair enough because the stuff I cover is quite abstract sometimes, and I welcome criticism because I can be wrong sometimes. But I feel the need to just talk about why I'm making these videos because I feel like I haven't made that point out there yet. Currently, there are only two people who are creating videos about mapping. There is Pishyfat and myself. Pishyfat has talked about some of the basics and some of the advanced stuff about mapping, and he's moving on to talk about the overall meta of mapping, while I focus on more of the advanced concepts of mapping, most of which I made up for myself. When it comes to beginners trying to learn about mapping, there is already quite a lot of documentation on the basics of the editor and how to create a basic map, but there isn't so much about the advanced stuff in mapping. Some topics are also quite hard to describe in writing. For example, flow is a pretty subjective topic in and of itself, which has fairly little documentation officially, and it's quite hard to describe things with just words and pictures. Personally, I just want to understand mapping on an advanced level, and in the current meta, why certain things are popular and other things are not. I've been trying to find these answers for a while now, and keeping it all to myself is a bit useless. So after hearing Charles's podcast just after he left, I decided to share my thoughts in the form of videos. Most of my method for trying to find these answers comes from my background as a physics student. I attempt to make hypotheses or assumptions from observations and then just test them over and over again. Sometimes I'll bring maths and dynamics into it like I did with momentum and flow. The problem with this is it's far from being perfect. Mapping is a creative subject. There will never be solid rules for everything. For example, art. There are infinitely many ways to paint a picture. Some ways look good, some ways look terrible. But it's almost impossible to make rules on how to paint the perfect picture, partly due to some people liking different kinds of art and some other rubbish like that. Music is also a creative subject. There are infinitely many ways to write a song. However, we also have music theory and time signatures and harmonics and all that. There are some rules with music which are consistent through almost every song that they all follow. This analogy can be brought into mapping as well. There are infinitely many ways to make a map in us. There are good ways to map, and there are bad ways to map. There are some rules that work consistently through all maps. For example, active and passive mapping recently made it into the standing ranking criteria since it was generally accepted. And there are some rules which are a bit more subjective and are more of a common theme with most maps and are broken for some other maps. Whether it's going to be a strict rule or just a common theme, I am just trying to make sense of it in the way I was taught to. I understand that it's impossible to create a strict set of rules to create a perfect map every single time. If there were, then we wouldn't need humans to create maps anymore. We could just write programs to generate maps for us. And I also understand that some of my theories can be wrong, and that's fine. In physics, theories come about by one person writing a paper on what they find, and people from all over the world review and test what they have written about. If it works, then it gets accepted into the realm of physics, and if it doesn't, then someone will probably modify it so it will work, and the cycle just repeats over and over again. The problem here is, I am just one person speaking my mind, so I welcome all the criticism I can get. The point I'm trying to make here is that I may be right or I may be wrong, but all I am doing is trying to understand mapping in the way I was taught to, and I'm just sharing my thoughts and theories.